Hello, this is the Bible History School. This is the 33rd session of Revelation and World History. At our Bible History School, we are serializing Revelation and World History in 12 chapters. As of last time, we have completed lectures from chapter 1 to chapter 4. In addition, the Bible History School is currently serializing Bible a Day to Great Acclaim. We are uploading a short video summarizing the 66 books of the Old and New Testaments one chapter a day. We would appreciate it if you could subscribe together. If you just read the Bible, there are many parts that are difficult to read and understand. It is much easier to understand the content if you watch a video that fits the situation rather than just reading the sentences. We made it into sentences that even middle and high school students can easily understand. Even for ordinary people who have difficulty reading the Bible due to their busy daily lives, it is good to meditate on one chapter of the Bible every day. We hope that you will encourage your children, parents, friends, and neighbors to read the Bible. Your support and encouragement has given us a lot of strength in producing Revelation and World History. This video is a collection of the entire video from chapter 4, sections 1 to 7 of Revelation and World History, provided by the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lecture Revelation and World History. Hello, this is the 25th lecture on Revelation and World History. We have completed chapters 1, 2, and 3 of the 12 chapters. Following the identification of the first beast in Revelation chapter 13, we have also identified the identity of the second beast. We have identified the actual historical figure, whose name, the number 666, matches the second beast. Not only does the number match the name, but we have historically proven that the beast's identity matches the prophetic description. Understanding the identities of the two beasts alone does not guarantee complete answers to the book of Revelation. A true answer lies in the fact that the history of not only the core of a specific nation, but also its periphery must be consistent. From this lecture onward, we will examine the identity of the 144,000 in chapter 4. Revelation and World History, chapter 4, the 144,000 sealed ones. Section 1, are the 144,000 a real number? The biggest issues in interpreting the book of Revelation are: is the person corresponding to 666 a real person? And do the 144,000 sealed ones refer to a real number of people? Organizations that teach eschatology, such as Jehovah's Witnesses, say that the number refers to the number of witnesses who will be saved by their group. Charles Taze Russell, the first president of the Watchtower Society, claimed that the number 144,000 is a literal number of individuals who make up spiritual Israel. And Jehovah's Witnesses literally make up the 144,000 anointed spiritual Israel. Refer to Revelation, the Grand Climax is at hand, published by the Watchtower Society. Some see it as the number of ministers who will be active at the end of time, or the number of Israelites who will be saved during the Great Tribulation. We referred to Li Guang Bak's explanation of difficult questions about the book of Revelation. Many other commentators interpret the number as symbolic. Let us examine the text of Revelation chapter 7. Verse 1, After this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that they should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. Verse 2, Then I saw another angel, ascending from the rising of the sun, having the seal of the living God. He cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels, who had been given power to harm the earth and the sea. Verse 3, saying, "Do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees, until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads." Verse 4, then I heard the number of those who were sealed. Those who were sealed, from each tribe of the people of Israel, were 144,000. Verse 5, from the tribe of Judah were sealed 12,000. Revelation chapter 7, verses 1 to 12. There were 12,000 from each tribe of Israel, a total of 144,000 from the 12 tribes. The first beast that came out of the sea, the 7-headed beast, refers to the Soviet Union. We have already seen that the second beast that came out of the land, the 2-horned beast, refers to the Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il regimes of North Korea, one of the countries that were communized by the Soviet Union. When interpreting the book of prophecy, if the 2 historical events in the text show a long time difference, or are applied to separate events, the interpretation will lose consistency. Also, if similar events are discovered through various eras, many similarities can be found. However, when interpreting the book of Revelation, all of these must be organically related to each other, in the same specific era, in order to draw the correct overall picture. The number, 144,000, is clearly related to the people of God, who believe in Jesus Christ. This is because the book of Revelation is a prophecy, proclaimed in the name of Jesus Christ. So we can see that this number is related to the number of Christians in a country. Since the text says, the number of the descendants of Israel, in fact, some interpret that the number of those among the Jews who are sealed, that is, those who believe in Jesus, will be 144,000. We referred to no Wu Hos, Revelation made easy to understand. There are more people in Israel today who believe only in the Old Testament as the Word of God, and do not recognize Jesus Christ as the Messiah. Therefore, some may say that there are significantly fewer Christians among the Israelites, and that 144,000 is quite a large number. Even so, the number of Christians in one nation or country is not that large, 144,000. We should keep in mind that this number is closely related to a certain historical event or historical background that appears in the text of the book of Revelation. The 144,000 is directly related to the number of Christians in the Korean Church. Babylon is the Soviet Union, and the country with a ruler with the number 666 is the Kim Il-sung regime. The most notorious of the top rulers of the Soviet Union, the person he put forward during the Stalin era. Kim Il-sung is the person who destroyed all the churches in North Korea during his reign. This number, 144,000, is also a number that is related to the Korean Church. There are many interpretations of the 144,000 mentioned in the book of Revelation, whether they are literal or symbolic. The Bible History School has revealed that 666 is not a symbolic number, but rather the number of actual names of people. Furthermore, we have identified a historical scene where the number 144,000 actually occurred. Next time, we'll look at how these 144,000 appear in history. This was the Bible History School. You can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and world history by subscribing and setting up notifications. Hello, this is the 26th lecture on Revelation and world history. We have completed chapters 1, 2, and 3 of the 12 chapters. Following the identification of the first beast, in Revelation chapter 13, we have also identified the identity of the second beast. We have identified the actual historical figure, whose name, the number 666, matches the second beast. Not only does the number match the name, but we have historically proven that the beast's identity matches the prophetic description. Understanding the identities of the two beasts alone does not guarantee complete answers to the book of Revelation. A true answer lies in the fact that the history of not only the core of a specific nation, but also its periphery must be consistent. In this lecture, we will examine the fact that the 144,000 actually appear in history. Revelation and World History, Chapter 4, Section 2. The 144,000 and the Korean Church, Part 1. The establishment of the Presbyterian Church of Korea. The foundation of the Presbyterian Church in Korea was laid in 1876. When Yi Eung Chan was baptized in Manchuria and began translating the Bible. However, its missionary history began in September 1884. When Allen, a medical missionary from the American Northern Presbyterian Church, arrived in Incheon. The official beginning of the Presbyterian Church in Korea was in April 1885. With the arrival of American Presbyterian missionary Horace Grant Underwood in April 1885. After that, missionaries such as Samuel Moffat, Reynolds, and Davis continued to arrive in Korea. In Wonho Province, a Korean-centered church had already been established in 1884. In 1893, the Southern and Northern Presbyterian missions joined forces to form the Missionary Council. That's how the Korean Presbyterian Church's organizational structure was established. In 1901, the Missionary Council, incorporating Korean representatives, formed the Joseon Presbyterian Council. A consultative body was established between Koreans and missionaries. And a seminary was established to train ministers. On September 17, 1907, the Joseon Presbytery of the Presbyterian Church was established in Pyongyang. The seminary produced its first graduating class of 7, who were ordained as pastors. The graduates were sent as missionaries to places like Jeju Island and Vladivostok, where they evangelized among Koreans. On September 1, 1912, the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church of Korea was organized in Pyongyang. The era of the Presbyterian Church of Korea has truly begun. Referenced from the Pascal Encyclopedia, Presbyterian Church of Korea. Catholicism first arrived on the Korean Peninsula in the late 18th century. About 100 years later, Christianity arrived. After that, missionary work developed during the Japanese colonial period. Among Korean Christians, the Presbyterian Church is the largest. The numbers presented in the Book of Revelation are related to the number of Presbyterian members. This does not mean that the Presbyterian Church is the only denomination recognized by God. God has established a plan to spread His will throughout the world, and He has chosen a nation to carry out that plan. Moreover, God has chosen specific individuals and groups within that plan to carry it out. Through Him, God unfolds His will in the human world. God chose the Jews to write the Bible, and from their lineage, Jesus Christ was born. However, this does not mean that the Jews are the only people God chose. God simply chose one nation from among mankind to reveal His plan. The Bible and the prophetic books were written in Palestine and its surroundings. However, the place where these prophecies are fulfilled is the Korean Peninsula and its surroundings. The connection between the number of Presbyterian members in the Korean Church and the number of 144,000 mentioned in the Book of Revelation is due to the close connection between this number and Pyongyang, the historical site of the fulfillment of the prophecy. Pyongyang is where the first Presbyterian seminary was established. It is also the place where the first Korean Presbyterian pastor was produced, and the place where the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church of Korea was first organized was also Pyongyang. Pyongyang is also the seat of power for Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, corresponding to the number 666. Pyongyang was also the place where the shrine visit resolution was passed under pressure from the Japanese Empire. The 144,000 does not mean that the total number of those saved is only 144,000. This means that, at some point during a specific period, during the fulfillment of the prophecy in the Book of Revelation, there will be 144,000 suffering Christians. The passage in Revelation chapter 7, verse 9, "And after them came a great multitude that no one could count," clearly demonstrates that the 144,000 does not refer to the total number of those saved. The number of Presbyterians in Korea exceeded 144,000 in 1911. According to the minutes of the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church of Korea, the number of Presbyterians in 1911 was 144,261. However, the following year, in 1912, that number decreased to 127,228. Reference was made to Volume 1 of History of Korean Christianity, published by the Korean Christian History Research Association. This was because the Japanese government fabricated the attempted assassination of Governor General Terauchi, also known as the 105 Incident, and began arresting those involved in September 1911. This marked the beginning of the Japanese colonial rule's full-scale suppression of Korean churches, and the number of Christians temporarily decreased as a result. Let me briefly outline the 105 people incident here. In 1911, Japan oppressed Joseon as part of its military rule, and the 105 people incident was fabricated to suppress the national movement. Under the pretext of the attempted assassination of Governor General Terauchi, National Enlightenment activists, including Shinminho and Christian leaders, were arrested. Using the On Myung-gun incident as a pretext, the Japanese government branded the Shinminho an anti-Japanese secret society and used violence and torture to coerce false confessions. They were charged with plotting to assassinate the governor, and 123 people were brought to trial. Of those, 105 people were convicted. While numerous patriots were imprisoned, this incident ultimately fueled the flames of the independence movement. Even under Japanese oppression, the national liberation movement continued, and independence activists implicated in this incident fled overseas, expanding the scope of resistance. Reference was made to History of Korean Christianity 1, The Origins and Fabrication of the 105 People Incident. Thus, the 105 People Incident can be seen as a significant event, marking the beginning of the Japanese imperialists' persecution of the Korean Church. The number 144,000 mentioned in the Book of Revelation is a number that appears at a specific point in time in the fulfillment of the prophecy. In 1910, the Korean Peninsula was forcibly annexed by Japan, and colonial rule began. The 105 People Incident of 1911 marked the beginning of Japan's oppression of Korea and its full-scale persecution of the Church. During this period, the number of Presbyterian church members in Korea reached 144,000. This is recorded in detail in the minutes of the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church in Korea. The following year, on September 1, 1912, the First Presbyterian General Assembly in Korea was formed. Next time, we will examine the situation of the Korean Church, at this time in more detail. It was the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and world history. Hello, this is the 27th lecture on Revelation and world history. Following the identification of the first beast in Revelation chapter 13, we have also identified the identity of the second beast. We have identified the actual historical figure, whose name, the number 666, matches the second beast. Not only does the number match the name, but we have historically proven that the beast's identity matches the prophetic description. Understanding the identities of the two beasts alone does not guarantee complete answers to the book of Revelation. A true answer lies in the fact that the history of not only the core of a specific nation, but also its periphery must be consistent. In the last lecture, we learned that the 144,000 actually appear in history. In this lecture, we will learn a little more about the related history. Revelation and World History, Chapter 4, Section 2. The 144,000, and the Korean Church, Part 2. Around the time of the Japan-Korea Annexation Treaty of 1910, the Korean Church launched the Million Souls Salvation Movement. The Million Souls Salvation Movement means let's lead 1 million people to God. The Japanese Empire misunderstood this movement as the army of 1 million soldiers of the cross, and refused to recognize it as a genuine religious movement. Therefore, the Japanese Empire fabricated the 105 people incident and conspired to eradicate Christianity by arresting teachers, students, and church leaders from Christian schools in the northwestern region, who participated in the Million Souls Saving Movement. In addition to the 105 people incident, 1911 and 1912 were marked by other important historical events in the Korean Church. In September 1912, the Presbyterian General Assembly was formed in Korea, under the name of the Joseon Presbyterian Church General Assembly. In September 1887, Saemonon Church, the first organized Presbyterian church in Korea, was founded. And on September 17, 1907, the first presbytery of the Korean Presbyterian Church was formed at Jangdaehyun Church in Pyongyang. 5 years after, 7 graduates of Pyongyang Theological Seminary were ordained as pastors. The Presbyterian General Assembly was formed. In September 1911, the 105 people incident led to the arrest of leading figures, students, and teachers in the northwestern region. Meanwhile, on September 17, 1911, the Fifth Presbytery meeting was held at Namunon Church in Daegu. This presbytery voted to organize a general assembly and elevate the 7 delegates to the 7 presbyteries. In accordance with this resolution, the Jeolla Presbytery was organized at the Seomunbak Church in Jeonju on October 15, 1911. Following this, the Jongchung Presbytery was organized at Saemonon Church in Seoul on December 4. And on December 8, the Wonghab Presbytery was organized at the Bongsan Yungcheon Modong Church. The following year, the Gyeongsang Presbytery was organized at Busanjan Church in the south on January 6, 1912. the Nampyeongan Presbytery at Pyongyang Theological Seminary on January 28, and the Bukpyeongan Presbytery at Bukchurch in Seoncheon on February 15. Finally, the Hamgyong Presbytery was organized on February 20 at the Wonsan Sang-ri Church, bringing the total number of presbyteries to 7. These 7 presbyteries met on September 1, 1912, to form the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church of Korea. We referred to the first volume of History of Korean Christianity, published by the Korean Christian History Research Association. Despite Japan's attempts to suppress Christianity by fabricating incidents, like the 105 people incident, immediately after the annexation of Korea, the Korean Church united further, organizing presbyteries and forming a General Assembly. This period marks the point at which the total membership of the Korean Presbyterian Church reached 144,000. The number of Korean Presbyterians, which had reached 144,000 in 1911, declined due to the 105 people incident. This figure of 144,000 shows several more waves of falling and then rising again. 144,261 in 1911, 127,228 in 1912, 114,106 in 1917, 156,628 in 1918, 141,044 in 1919, 182,650 in 1925, 144,898 in 1927, 174,312 in 1929, and 256,575 in 1941, etc. We referred to the second volume of History of Korean Christianity, published by the Korean Christian History Research Association. In 1885, the first worship service began at the home of missionary Underwood. In September 1887, the first organized Presbyterian church in Korea, Saemanon Church in Seoul, was established. Then, with the establishment of Jangdaehyun Church in Pyongyang in 1893, the number of Presbyterians in Korea began to increase steadily. The number of Presbyterians in Korea reached 144,000 in 1911. Then, after the 105 people incident, the number dropped below that level again. Then, it recovered between 1917 and 1918, following the Russian Revolution. In 1919, during the March 1 independence movement, the number dropped again to around 144,000. And once again in 1927, the number of believers reached 144,000. After that, the number never fell below 144,000 and continued to increase. Typically, when a group's membership continues to grow, it often reaches a certain number only once or twice. But, as we can see throughout history, the number 144,000 has been repeatedly centered around and emphasized. This is no coincidence. God has repeatedly emphasized this number, clearly demonstrating that the history of the Korean Church is the site of the fulfillment of God's prophecies. The number 144,000, mentioned in the book of Revelation, is a number that appears at a specific point in time in the fulfillment of the prophecy. In 1910, the Korean Peninsula was forcibly annexed by Japan, and colonial rule began. The 105 people incident of 1911 marked the beginning of Japan's oppression of Korea and its full-scale persecution of the Church. During this period, the number of Presbyterian church members in Korea reached 144,000. This is recorded in detail in the minutes of the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church in Korea. The following year, on September 1, 1912, the First Presbyterian General Assembly in Korea was formed. Despite the continued oppression of the Korean Church by the Japanese, the Korean Church continued to grow day by day. In the next lecture, we will learn about the geographical situation of the Korean Peninsula. It was the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and world history. Hello, this is the 28th lecture on Revelation and world history. Last time, we learned that the 144,000 appear in real history. The number 144,000, mentioned in the book of Revelation, is a number that appears at a specific point in time in the fulfillment of the prophecy. In 1910, the Korean Peninsula was forcibly annexed by Japan, and colonial rule began. The 105 people incident of 1911 marked the beginning of Japan's oppression of Korea and its full-scale persecution of the Church. During this period, the number of Presbyterian Church members in Korea reached 144,000. This is recorded in detail in the minutes of the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church in Korea. The following year, on September 1, 1912, the First Presbyterian General Assembly in Korea was formed. Despite the continued oppression of the Korean Church by the Japanese, the Korean Church continued to grow day by day. In this lecture, we'll explore the historical sites where prophecy is fulfilled. Revelation and World History, Chapter 4, Section 3. The Sunrise and the Korean Peninsula. Then I saw another angel, ascending from the sunrising, having the seal of the living God. Revelation chapter 7, verse 2. The place where the angel came with the seal of God is described as the sunrising. Basically, the sunrising refers to the east. However, if it refers to a specific region, it becomes vague. It is difficult to determine whether it refers to the east of Jerusalem or Palestine, or to another region. First, Asia, meaning east, could be the appropriate term. Centered around Greece, the region of present-day Turkey was called Asia. Therefore, in comparison to the entire Asia region, that region alone was sometimes called Asia Minor. In the book of Revelation, the direction the angel came from, the direction of the rising sun, indicates the place where this prophecy will be fulfilled. So, is there a specific region on the round earth where the sun rises? Yes, it refers to the region where a new day begins, beyond the international dateline. There are several places, based on inhabited land, where a new day begins earliest beyond the international dateline. First, eastern Siberia, the northernmost region, falls into this category. Others include the Marshall Islands in the equatorial region, and New Zealand and nearby islands in the southern hemisphere. The southern hemisphere is excluded here. Because Babylon, as mentioned in the book of Revelation, is said to invade from the north, the southern hemisphere should be excluded. This means that the historical site where prophecy is fulfilled is the north. Siberia is a region of Russia, and thus part of the Soviet Union itself, and therefore not one of the countries invaded by Babylon. And then, there is Japan. However, Japan, as a nation that invaded the Korean Peninsula, and several Asian countries, is not considered a nation suffering from invasion. If that happens, the Korean Peninsula will be the only nation among the nations where the sun rises to be invaded by Babylon. Furthermore, the east of the rising sun should be viewed as the continent, connecting Africa, Europe, and Asia. The Korean Peninsula is located at the easternmost point of all these countries, in the direction of the rising sun. There's another point. It was during the Goryeo dynasty that the name of Korea became known to the world. But it also has another name, Joseon. This name is still used in North Korea as North Joseon. This national name, Joseon, was adopted by Yi Sung-kae when he founded his new nation, succeeding Goryeo. It is worth examining the meaning of the Chinese characters used to write Joseon. It is composed of the characters Jo, morning, and Sun, new. In other words, it means a country welcoming a new dawn. In other words, the national name Joseon also means a place welcoming a new dawn. A country located in the east, where the sun rises. This name, too, signifies a name predestined by God. The number, 144,000, is even more clear, because it relates to the number of believers in the Korean Church, who were persecuted by the Japanese. After 36 years of Japanese rule, the Korean Peninsula seemed poised for liberation, but Soviet intervention severed the peninsula's midsection. The northern half became a communist state, under the aegis of Red Babylon, the Soviet Union. Pyongyang, once called the Jerusalem of the East, became the center of a communist state, ruled by Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. Perhaps the nickname, Jerusalem of the East, was not a nickname, but rather a reference to the Korean Peninsula. Becoming the Jerusalem, the land of Israel, where biblical prophecy would be fulfilled. During the Japanese colonial period, the Korean Church experienced a great revival, despite Japanese oppression. However, Soviet intervention led to the communization of the northern half of the Korean Peninsula. At the time of liberation, 2/3 of Korean Christians were in North Korea. That is, how prosperous the church was in the North Korean region. However, the persecution of the Kim Il-sung regime led to the complete annihilation of the North Korean church. This marks the only instance, in the 2,000-year history of the global church, where the church was completely destroyed, under the control of a single ruler. In 1910, the Korean Peninsula was forcibly annexed by Japan, and colonial rule began. Following the 105 people incident in 1911, the Japanese began full-scale persecution of the Korean Church. During this period, the number of Presbyterian church members in Korea reached 144,000. Despite the continued persecution of the Korean Church by the Japanese, the Korean Church continued to grow day by day. The Book of Revelation and the prophecies describe the place where this history is fulfilled as the east where the sun rises. The prophecies are being fulfilled on the Korean Peninsula, located in the east, where the sun rises. In the next lecture, we will examine how this historical background aligns with the contents of the prophecies. It was the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and world history. Hello, this is the 29th lecture on Revelation and world history. Last time, we learned that the 144,000 appear in real history. The number 144,000, mentioned in the book of Revelation, is a number that appears at a specific point in time in the fulfillment of the prophecy. In 1910, the Korean Peninsula was forcibly annexed by Japan, and colonial rule began. The 105 people incident of 1911 marked the beginning of Japan's oppression of Korea and its full-scale persecution of the church. During this period, the number of Presbyterian church members in Korea reached 144,000. This is recorded in detail in the minutes of the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church in Korea. The following year, on September 1, 1912, the First Presbyterian General Assembly in Korea was formed. Despite the continued oppression of the Korean Church by the Japanese, the Korean Church continued to grow day by day. The first country to greet the sunrise across the international dateline is the Korean Peninsula. In this lecture, we will explore the connection between the Korean Peninsula and the 12 tribes of Israel. Revelation and World History, Chapter 4, Section 4. The 12 tribes and the Korean Church. The number of those sealed from each tribe of the children of Israel is 144,000. Revelation chapter 7, verse 4. The text of Revelation states that the number of 144,000 comes from the 12 tribes of Israel. Let's examine how this relates to the Korean Church. The text states that each tribe has 12,000, making a total of 144,000. However, this does not mean that each tribe has exactly 12,000. It simply means that each tribe has approximately 12,000, and the total is 144,000. So, are there 12 tribes on the Korean Peninsula? Yes, there are. However, the Korean Peninsula is not divided into tribes, each region composed of clans, like Israel. Instead, it is divided into several provinces called do. These include Gyeongsang-do, Chungcheong-do, and Gangwon-do. During the Joseon dynasty, it was divided into 8 provinces, but after the Gabo Reform 1894. During the Japanese colonial period, Jeju Island was not an autonomous province, but belonged to South Jeolla Province. Therefore, the total number of provinces in the entire Korean peninsula at that time was 13. However, only 12 tribes are mentioned in the text of Revelation. The numbers are different, 12 and 13, so you might think they don't match exactly. A closer look at the text can resolve this issue. Normally, when mentioning the 12 tribes of Israel, and including the tribe of Levi, the tribe of Joseph is not divided into 2. However, when dividing the tribe of Joseph into Manasseh and Ephraim, the tribe of Levi is not mentioned, which is a common expression in the Old Testament. For example, in Numbers 1, when counting the people, the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh were counted separately, but the tribe of Levi was commanded not to be counted. Numbers chapter 1, verse 49. This suggests that the number of tribes was essentially 12, excluding the tribe of Levi. However, the text in Revelation chapter 7 presents a different arrangement. While including the tribe of Levi, it also mentions the tribes of Manasseh and Joseph. And the tribe of Dan is omitted. Even if the tribe of Joseph is identified with the tribe of Ephraim, the omission of Dan is surprising. In other words, including the tribe of Dan, which should have been included, the total number of tribes would be 13. If that happens, the numbers of the 13 tribes of Israel and the 13 provinces of the Korean Peninsula will match exactly. The tribe of Joseph was divided into 2. It's possible that the reason for this division lies in the fact that 2 powers were originally 1, but each grew in size and divided into 2. This is similar to the Korean Peninsula, originally called the 8 provinces of Joseon, which was divided into South Gyeongsang Province and North Gyeongsang Province. The term Chungcheong Province people refers to people from South Chungcheong Province and North Chungcheong Province, without distinguishing between them. This division was merely for administrative convenience. Considering the division due to population growth and size, it is similar to the division of the tribe of Joseph into Manasseh and Ephraim. Israel was divided into 12 tribes. And we can see similar patterns throughout ancient Korean history. Let's examine the records of Han in the Chinese historical texts. Records of the Three Kingdoms, Book of Hui, and Dalnijan. At that time, the Korean peninsula was home to the three Hans, Ma Han, Jin Han, and Byun Han. Both Jin Han and Byun Han were said to have been comprised of 12 small states. Jin Han, located east of Ma Han, originally comprised 6 states, but gradually divided into 12. Byun Jin also comprised 12 states, with several small towns, each with a leader. Referenced from Chinese History of Joseon Kingdoms, edited by Kim Sung-koo. This is similar to the division of Israel into 12 tribes, showing that 12 small nations came together to form a single political community. The fact that the political communities existing in Israel, at the westernmost tip of Asia, and the Korean peninsula, at the easternmost tip, are divided into 12 distinct entities, is sufficient to demonstrate another connection. If the Israel described in the Bible is the Israel of Palestine, Israel, the land of the rising sun, where the prophecies of the Bible are fulfilled, is the Korean peninsula. It is the place called Jerusalem of the East. As the author of this article is Korean, we do not interpret it as centered on one's own history. If we examine the fulfillment of biblical prophecy, we can see that it aligns with the history of the Korean peninsula and the Korean church. The seven-headed beast is the Soviet Union. The number 144,000 refers to the number of believers in Korean churches during the Japanese colonial era. After the division of the Korean peninsula due to Soviet intervention, if you calculate the number of names of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, who ruled North Korea, it comes to exactly 666. During Kim Il-sung's reign, the North Korean church, known as the Jerusalem of the East, was annihilated. In light of this, we can see that the Book of Revelation is a prophecy fulfilled in the Soviet Union, the Red Beast of the North, and the Korean Peninsula, the Israel of the East, located in the place where the sun rises. The Book of Revelation and the prophetic books state that the place where prophecy is fulfilled is the east where the sun rises. This prophecy is being fulfilled on the Korean Peninsula, a place located in the east where the sun rises. Revelation chapter 7 verse 4 states that the total number of those sealed from the 12 tribes of Israel is 144,000. The Korean Peninsula, too, has been a united political community since the ancient Three Kingdoms period, when 12 small nations united. In this way, the histories of Israel and the Korean Peninsula are like twins. If the place where prophecy was recorded is Israel of Palestine, then the place where that prophecy is fulfilled is Israel of the East, the Korean Peninsula. Next time, we will explore the connection between the 7 churches of Asia and the Korean Church. It was the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and world history. Hello, this is the 30th lecture on Revelation and world history. Last time, we learned that the 144,000 appear in real history. The number 144,000, mentioned in the book of Revelation, is a number that appears at a specific point in time in the fulfillment of the prophecy. In 1910, the Korean Peninsula was forcibly annexed by Japan, and colonial rule began. The 105 People Incident of 1911 marked the beginning of Japan's oppression of Korea and its full-scale persecution of the Church. During this period, the number of Presbyterian Church members in Korea reached 144,000. This is recorded in detail in the minutes of the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church in Korea. The following year, on September 1, 1912, the First Presbyterian General Assembly in Korea was formed. Despite the continued oppression of the Korean Church by the Japanese, the Korean Church continued to grow day by day. The first country to greet the sunrise across the international dateline is the Korean Peninsula. In this lecture, we will learn about the relationship between the 7 churches of Asia and the Korean Church. Revelation and World History, Chapter 4, Section 5. 7 Churches of Asia. The Book of Revelation is written as letters to the 7 churches of Asia. The Presbyterian Church in Korea reached 144,000 members in 1911. At that time, the Korean Church divided the nation into 7 regions, forming 7 presbyteries. This was not a deliberate attempt to conform to the number 7, but rather the result of dividing the size of each presbytery equally based on the number of members and the size of the region. There was 1 presbytery, each in Jeonla-do, Gyeongsang-do, and Hamgyong-do. However, Pyongan Province is divided into the South Pyongan Presbytery and the North Pyongan Presbytery. And currently, the largest concentration of churches in South Korea is in the Seoul metropolitan area. However, during the Japanese colonial period, Gyeonggi and Chungcheong provinces were combined to form the Gyeongcheong Presbytery. This demonstrates that at that time, there was a significant number of Christians, centered around Pyongyang in North Korea. The 7 churches of Asia, mentioned in the Book of Revelation, were not 7 specific churches. The letters were addressed to the churches in the 7 regions of Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. Coincidentally, in 1911, when the first presbytery of the Korean Presbyterian Church was established, 7 presbyteries were established, divided into 7 regions, different from the number of administrative districts across the country. This number matches the 7 churches in Asia, to which the Book of Revelation was sent. This is a very surprising fact. If God planned and accomplished all of this in advance, God even made this number exactly the same. The number 7 appears frequently in the Book of Revelation. In September 1907, the first Korean pastors ordained in the Korean Presbyterian Church were 7 people. Bang Ki-chong, Seo Kyung-jo, Yang Jun-bak, Han Suk-jin, Lee Ki-pung, Gil Son-ju, Song In-seo. These 7 men were ordained pastors, who received theological education under the guidance of missionaries in Joseon at the time. The institution that ordained them was the Pyongyang Presbytery of the Presbyterian Church in Korea, the first Presbyterian presbytery in Korea. I will explain the mystery of the 7 stars that you saw at my right side, and the 7 gold lampstands. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the lampstands are the 7 churches. Revelation chapter 1, verse 20. The first pastors of the Presbyterian Church in Korea were 7 men. They are 7 church leaders. The first presbytery of the Korean Presbyterian Church was also composed of 7 presbyteries, matching the number 7. This is truly remarkable. The Book of Revelation and the prophetic books state that the place where prophecy is fulfilled is the east where the sun rises. This prophecy is being fulfilled on the Korean Peninsula, a place located in the east where the sun rises. Revelation chapter 7 verse 4 states that the total number of those sealed from the 12 tribes of Israel is 144,000. The Korean Peninsula, too, has been a united political community since the ancient Three Kingdoms period, when 12 small nations united. In this way, the histories of Israel and the Korean Peninsula are like twins. If the place where prophecy was recorded is Israel of Palestine, then the place where that prophecy is fulfilled is Israel of the East, the Korean Peninsula. In September 1907, the first 7 pastors in the Korean Presbyterian Church were ordained at the Pyongyang Presbytery. And in 1911, the entire Korean Peninsula was divided into 7 districts, establishing 7 presbyteries. The 7 pastors are the 7 church messengers. The 7 presbyteries are the 7 churches of Asia. In the next lecture, we will learn about another remarkable historical event that occurred in 1912, when the first General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church in Korea was held. It was the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and world history. Hello, this is the 31st lecture on Revelation and world history. Last time, we learned that the 144,000 appear in real history. The number 144,000, mentioned in the book of Revelation, is a number that appears at a specific point in time in the fulfillment of the prophecy. In 1910, the Korean Peninsula was forcibly annexed by Japan, and colonial rule began. The 105 people incident of 1911 marked the beginning of Japan's oppression of Korea and its full-scale persecution of the church. During this period, the number of Presbyterian church members in Korea reached 144,000. This is recorded in detail in the minutes of the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church in Korea. The following year, on September 1, 1912, the First Presbyterian General Assembly in Korea was formed. Despite the continued oppression of the Korean Church by the Japanese, the Korean Church continued to grow day by day. The first country to greet the sunrise across the international dateline is the Korean Peninsula. In this lecture, we will explore the significant historical events that occurred in 1912. Revelation and World History, Chapter 4, Section 6. The year 1912. The number 144,000 corresponds to the number of members in the Korean Presbyterian Church. During the First General Assembly, comprised of 7 presbyteries from 1911 to 1912. The year 1912 also holds another significance. It is also the year that none other than Kim Il-sung was born, and he is a person whose name has the number 666. Kim Il-sung's birthday was April 15, 1912. At that time, the number of Presbyterian church members in Korea reached 144,000. This was also the beginning of the full-scale persecution of the Korean Church by the Japanese, including the 105-person incident. Kim Il-sung ascended to power in Pyongyang, which was called the Jerusalem of the East. And Kim Il-sung completely destroyed the North Korean Church. The year that Kim Il-sung was born was 1912. At that time, there were more provinces in the Korean Peninsula, but they formed a General Assembly by creating 7 presbyteries. Kim Il-sung was born in 1912, the year the First General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church of Korea was held. It also seems clear that this was not a coincidence, but was done according to God's plan. On the day Kim Il-sung was born, a world-famous event occurred. That was the sinking of the Titanic. At approximately 11:40 p.m. on April 14, 1912, the Titanic collided with an iceberg. At approximately 2:20 a.m. on April 15, the Titanic completely sank. This event has been made into numerous movies, making it so well known that everyone knows it. Kim Il-sung was born on the very day the Titanic sank. Could this be a coincidence, or is this also a sign? On the day of this unfortunate event, Kim Il-sung, the man who would bring the most unfortunate history to the Korean Peninsula and the Korean Church, was born. If this incident was a sign of Kim Il-sung's birth, then there are also signs of his death. Astrologists often say that a large star falling announces the death of a prominent figure in the nation. A similar phenomenon occurred at Kim Il-sung's death. It is the Shoemaker-Levy comet collision event with Jupiter. Comet Shoemaker-Levy was discovered on March 25, 1993. Just over a year and 4 months before its collision with Jupiter. It was discovered by chance by American astronomers Shoemaker and Levy, while observing an asteroid with a telescope at Palomar Observatory in the United States. This comet was a collision between several pieces of the comet and Jupiter between July 16 and 22, 1994. This collision between a giant planet like Jupiter and a comet may be the largest collision ever observed since humans began observing stars with telescopes. There have been numerous instances of asteroids, rocky chunks orbiting Earth or other planets in our solar system, colliding with stars. However, the collision of an orbiting comet, pulled by Jupiter's gravity, was highly unusual. People around the world have been tuning in for days to see this cosmic show. Everyone was amazed to see the flash of light that occurred as it collided with Jupiter. An ancient astrologer, if he had witnessed this, would have declared it a very ominous sign, indicating the disappearance of a great figure from history. On July 8, 1994, just a week before this comet impact, Kim Il-sung died. Born on the day the Titanic sank, Kim Il-sung died just before comet Shoemaker-Levy collided with Jupiter. The two incidents may have nothing to do with each other. However, to the author who was interpreting history, it was clearly an unusual event. 1994, the year Kim Il-sung died, marked exactly 49 years since he emerged in North Korea and assumed power in 1945. 49 years can be expressed as 7 weeks. 7 weeks is also a number that appears in the book of Daniel. A figure with the number 666 destroyed all the churches in his territory, ruled for 49 years, and then died. This signified that the final chapter of history, one of the fulfillments of prophecy, was unfolding very rapidly. 666 is a number that can only be completed by combining the names of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. Kim Il-sung ruled for 49 years and died. Power was then passed to his son, Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-il was born in 1942 and died in 2011. Since ancient times, Koreans have considered the year of birth to be 1 year old. Kim Jong-il was exactly 70 years old in Korean age when he died. Kim Il-sung ruled for 49 years, and Kim Jong-il died at the age of 70. This is the same period as the 70 years that the Soviet Union existed. Kim Il-sung's name, Il-sung, means to accomplish that day. And Kim Jong-il's name, Jong-il, means that very day. The two horns of the two-horned beast, appearing in Revelation chapter 13, verse 11, are Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. And the number of their names is 666. We can discover the surprising fact that the meanings of their names, the length of their reigns, and the number of years they lived all coincide with the numbers recorded in the Bible. Kim Il-sung was not a small figure who ruled over a small eastern country, or half of the Korean peninsula. In the history of the world church, he is a very important figure who destroyed all churches in the country he ruled. Through him, the prophecies recorded in the Old Testament and the book of Revelation were fulfilled. The year that this person with such a history was born was 1912. At that time, the number of members of the Korean Presbyterian Church reached 144,000. The book of Revelation and the prophetic books state that the place where prophecy is fulfilled is the east where the sun rises. This prophecy is being fulfilled on the Korean Peninsula, a place located in the east where the sun rises. Revelation chapter 7 verse 4 states that the total number of those sealed from the 12 tribes of Israel is 144,000. The Korean Peninsula, too, has been a united political community since the ancient Three Kingdoms period, when 12 small nations united. In this way, the histories of Israel and the Korean Peninsula are like twins. If the place where prophecy was recorded is Israel of Palestine, then the place where that prophecy is fulfilled is Israel of the East, the Korean Peninsula. In September 1907, the first 7 pastors in the Korean Presbyterian Church were ordained at the Pyongyang Presbytery. And in 1911, the entire Korean Peninsula was divided into 7 districts, establishing 7 presbyteries. The 7 pastors are the 7 church messengers. The 7 presbyteries are the 7 churches of Asia. On September 1, 1912, the first General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church in Korea was established. It was around this time, in 1912, when the number of Presbyterian church members in Korea reached 144,000, that Kim Il-sung was born. It was Kim Il-sung who annihilated the North Korean church, known as the Jerusalem of the East. The sum of the names of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il is 666. It was the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and world history. Hello, this is the 32nd lecture on Revelation and world history. Up until last time, we learned that the 144,000 appear in actual history. The number 144,000, mentioned in the book of Revelation, is a number that appears at a specific point in time in the fulfillment of the prophecy. In 1910, the Korean Peninsula was forcibly annexed by Japan, and colonial rule began. The 105 people incident of 1911 marked the beginning of Japan's oppression of Korea and its full-scale persecution of the church. During this period, the number of Presbyterian church members in Korea reached 144,000. This is recorded in detail in the minutes of the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church in Korea. The following year, on September 1, 1912, the First Presbyterian General Assembly in Korea was formed. Despite the continued oppression of the Korean Church by the Japanese, the Korean Church continued to grow day by day. The first country to greet the sunrise across the international dateline is the Korean Peninsula. In this lecture, we will explore the historical significance of the Presbyterian Church in Korea. Revelation and World History, Chapter 4, Section 7. Is the Presbyterian Church the only chosen denomination? The term, chosen people, means a people specially chosen by God. Does this mean that only the Korean Church, and specifically the Presbyterian Church in Korea, is recognized by God? No. However, it is true that they were specially chosen. The number of 144,000 members does not refer to the total number of members of the Korean Church. This is the total number of members of the Korean Presbyterian Church at a specific time. However, this shows that God chose a specific group to fulfill His will. It's simply that certain nations and groups were chosen to fulfill God's plan. Therefore, it does not mean that only that country or group is the object of God's salvation. The people chosen for history for the recording of the Bible are the Israelites. However, the historical stage chosen for the fulfillment of biblical prophecy is the Korean Peninsula. Among them, the Presbyterian Church was specifically chosen. But this does not mean that the Presbyterian Church alone can be declared the model church. In September 1938, the Presbyterian Church, yielding to Japanese oppression, apostatized by committing Shinto shrine worship through a resolution of the General Assembly. Furthermore, this apostasy incident sparked a division within the Presbyterian Church after liberation, ultimately leading to its fragmentation into dozens of denominations. After liberation from Japanese colonial rule, the Korean Church experienced a remarkable numerical revival. However, the tragedy of the division of the Church, the body of Christ, still persists, a reality of which we cannot be proud. To tear apart the Church, the body of Christ, is a grave crime before God. During the Japanese colonial period, this Korean Church was praised as the Jerusalem of the East. And after liberation, it experienced growth unparalleled in world church history. Nevertheless, the reality of the Korean Church is that it still bears numerous charges, including acts of apostasy before God and divisions in the Church. It is no different from the Lord's rebuke to the 7 churches in Asia at the beginning of the book of Revelation. The very essence of God's rebuke remains in the Korean Church. The purpose of interpreting prophecy is to clearly understand where we should be heading, and to live a life of faith in accordance with God's will. Even if certain nations and groups were chosen, this does not mean that they are the only righteous group. God chose them, proclaimed His plan through prophecy, and brought it to fruition. We must see and understand this fact, and, through it, understand what God wants to say to humanity. First, we must strive to correctly understand His will. If we believe the answer presented in Revelation and world history is correct, then we must understand what we must do next. And if you think no, then you also have a responsibility to constantly question what the correct interpretation is. The book of Revelation and the prophetic books state that the place where prophecy is fulfilled is the east where the sun rises. This prophecy is being fulfilled on the Korean Peninsula, a place located in the east where the sun rises. Revelation chapter 7 verse 4 states that the total number of those sealed from the 12 tribes of Israel is 144,000. The Korean Peninsula, too, has been a united political community since the ancient Three Kingdoms period, when 12 small nations united. In this way, the histories of Israel and the Korean Peninsula are like twins. If the place where prophecy was recorded is Israel of Palestine, then the place where that prophecy is fulfilled is Israel of the East, the Korean Peninsula. In September 1907, the first 7 pastors in the Korean Presbyterian Church were ordained at the Pyongyang Presbytery. And in 1911, the entire Korean peninsula was divided into 7 districts, establishing 7 presbyteries. The 7 pastors are the 7 church messengers. The 7 presbyteries are the 7 churches of Asia. On September 1, 1912, the first General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church in Korea was established. It was around this time, in 1912, when the number of Presbyterian church members in Korea reached 144,000, that Kim Il-sung was born. It was Kim Il-sung who annihilated the North Korean church, known as the Jerusalem of the East. The sum of the names of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il is 666. It was the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can continue listening to the lectures on Revelation and world history.